Well, thank you all for coming to this training session. Um, as you probably notice, this time we've decided to record it and probably put it up on YouTube. I'm not quite sure whether I will yet. But what this is all about is um, how the IRS and other regulators look at our data. And I think that the difficulty we've had so far is that some people don't actually still realize how simple it is and will continue to do things we ask them not to do. Anyway, what I'm going to do, if you look on the screen, I have a subdirectory here which is called my training subdirectory. I'm going to start straight away by getting into this training subdirectory and show you. Now, the first thing I'd like you to have a look at is this IRS first day letter, or at least that's what we call it. Now, this is what you will get from the IRS from time to time. Now, it says here Internal Revenue Service, and it's got the address of the Internal Revenue Service here. And then it says, Dear Sir, Madam, the Banking Secrets Act BSA requires that a financial institution reports currency transactions of more than 10,000, etc., etc., etc. So essentially, what this letter is telling you is that they're going to actually come to visit you on a particular day. But they tell you that there is going to be an examination. If you actually look here, it tells you the period included in this compliance examination is October 1, 2010 through to March 31st, 2010. Okay, so usually this is a 6-month period. I haven't actually calculated this, but I presume it's still probably a 6-month period. And it says, please have available the records requested in the enclosed form. Okay, now what the IRS want really is for me to send you all, send them all your data, all the transactions you've done for this period, so they can have a look. Now, I tend to have a look as well and then see whether there are potential issues. If you have customers who you should collect data from that you haven't collected. Now, if you look down at the bottom here, it says if the appointment date or time is inconvenient, please contact the examiner so a mutually satisfactory date and time can be arranged. Well, the reality is that if you don't have yourself organized, you can postpone it as long as you like, but the day will come when they will come. Now, this letter here, believe it or not, is not one I've made up. This is actually to a real agent. In fact, this one comes from one of our agents whose name is rather short, and so I've actually deleted it here. But this could be your agency African market. Now, when people get this, they start to panic, and usually they call me and tell me all sorts of different things. Now, if you look carefully, this one came from Paul Dudek, and some of you may actually have had the benefit of dealing with Paul Dudek before. Anyway, so we have a good look at this document, and I mean, we can make it bigger if it will help, but doesn't matter how big we make it in the end. All it says is that the IRS is coming. Okay. Now, if you have not been doing all the right things, then I have to say by that time it is too late for you. And that's all I can say. Okay. Now, you know, the IRS want to see a whole lot of things listed here. Most of them are fairly straightforward things. They want to see the compliance program. You know, they probably want to see your bank records. They want to see things like your agency agreement for when you started working with us. and so on and so forth. Training records, you know, to show that you have been coming to training as we're doing now. Okay, so all that may be fine, but the most important thing is that in the end, if they look through your data and your data is not up to scratch, then we have a problem. That's all there is to it. So we're going to look at things like your transactions for people who did transactions over $3,000, over $6,000, and all the other thresholds. Okay. I do my best to be helpful when you get these letters so you don't panic, but the reality is that it would have been up to you to have done all the proper things so that your data looks decent when the IRS finally arrive on your site. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look at what a sample of the data that the IRS will ask me for, what it actually looks like. Okay. Okay. Let's look at this one that says non-structured. Okay. If we look at non-structured, this is sort of the data that the IRS is looking for. And this is the format in which I send it to them. Now, if you want to figure out what exactly they're looking for, I'm going to expand these columns so you can actually see them. Okay, so say format, and I'm going to increase the width of all these columns to say about 25 points. Okay, now if you look, the first thing is the transaction reference. The IRS want the transaction reference. These are actually proper transaction records from one of our agents, and I've made a couple of modifications because of privacy concerns. But if you look in this column, here we have the transaction numbers or the transaction codes or the transaction reference as we call them. So normally it would be 101TR 98772 etc. In the next column, you've got the sequence numbers. Some of you may have noticed that each transaction has a sequence number that tells which transaction was done before which one, etc. This tells us that the transactions are going to Ghana. I really normally, when I look at the data, take these things out simply because all transactions go to Ghana. Okay, if we look here, source amount. Okay, now source amount obviously starts with USD because it's US dollars. Okay, we can look here as well. We see destination amount, and destination amount tells us in Ghana this was the amount the parties received. Now, if we look here, we can tell the rate on that day is shown here. So how much did the remitter pay? I mean, if you look here, you'll see he sent 240. Okay, so if you add the commission, he paid 250. Now, what's happening is that there are a whole lot of things hidden here, but really the commission is here. So if you added the commission to the 240 on the other side, I'm just going to move it a little bit so you can see. So if you see 10 plus the 240 there gives the 250 here. Okay. Now, this tells us what deductions do you make. Nobody is allowed to make deductions, so the deductions will show 0. Okay. Now, who was the remitter? Well, if we look here, we can see the remitter was Christiana Echam, Rebecca Akwe, Ajekum Williams, etc. What I need you to look out for is telephone number, remitter telephone number. The IRS want me to give them the remitter telephone number. In fact, they actually want the address as well, but we normally cannot download the address and give it to them. But just if, say, You have, for instance, if you look, Saidoff Boateng Ajman has this telephone number. Saidoff Boateng Ajman has this telephone number. Now, if Kwabena Frimpong had exactly the same telephone number and Kwabena Frimpong came in 5 minutes after Saidoff Boateng, it's difficult to suggest that Kwabena Asari, if you forgive me, it's difficult to suggest that Kwabena Asari and Saidoff Boateng are not one and the same person. Okay, I want you to have a look at that again. Okay, if we look here, we see the beneficiary name. So this is the party in America, this is the party in Ghana. Okay, now we send them this information as well. The transaction was cash collection, or maybe it was payment into an account. They want that information, the name of the agent. Now it all shows TR, TR, TR because it's just the same agent. But the banking department of New York, for instance, will ask us for data from the whole country, and there you'll have TR, KP, PQ, all sorts of different agents. Okay. Now, if we come here, there's a column here that tells you which bank the money was collected from. This is not really useful in the sense that it's all Ghana Commercial Bank at the moment, so it doesn't really tell us anything. Now, there's a column here that says GBP profit, and I'm not quite sure what that means. But then we come to the two most important columns. If you look here, the IRS can tell what date you did the transaction and what time you did the transaction, and then they can also tell whether the transaction has been collected or the transaction is actually waiting to be collected. Or if we scroll down, there may actually be, I just saw one. Look at this one. This transaction is deleted. Now, a simple question that you'd expect any IRS agent to ask is, okay, so if we have data and it was a transaction, the transaction was deleted, it was 6,000 and it was deleted. Okay, well, maybe we look again and the same transaction appears 10 minutes later, $6,020. That's fine. You know, the person did the transaction, realized they wanted to pay some more or wanted to send more money, asked you to delete it, and they redid it. But a simple one, if say somebody did a transaction for 3,000 and then now it shows as 3,000 deleted, well, then the most logical question to me is, why was it deleted? And usually it's because we asked for ID, etc., etc., and the person didn't have it. So they asked us to delete it. This is precisely the sort of thing that we don't want to happen. If you do the transaction, well, if they don't have the ID, then they don't have it. But if they are unwilling to produce it and they suggest to you that, well, cancel it, give me back my money, it's not as simple as that. Once we cancel it, it doesn't go away, it stays there and everybody can see it. So that's a point I needed you to understand. In fact, what I am going to do to make it easy for all of you is to sort out this data and show you how easy it is to show all the deleted transactions. So I'm going to start from here. I highlight this and then I'm going to drag all the way to the bottom. Okay, forgive me. There we are. That's all your transactions. Now, I want you to watch this. See, when I put the mouse here, it says data. If I click on data, now, then I come here, I'm about to sort. So I click, and I'm going to take my time so you can see it. Sort. So I get another box, which is a sort box. Now, if you look, you can actually see that this is column R. So I just come down here. Oh, well, I didn't even need to do that. It's already telling me that do I want to sort on status. So I can actually choose, let's say, all the headers here are shown at the bottom here. Source amount, etc., etc. So I'm going to choose status. I'm going to wait a little bit so you can see it. Status. And I'm going to say OK. And you see all the deleted showing. We can see that here. These are all the deleted transactions. 2 seconds and the IRS or whoever wants to have a look at it can see it. And from time to time, we get asked the question, why was this transaction deleted? I actually try and explain to people, if you look, all these transactions that show as deleted, if you actually look here, these transactions appear as minus the transaction. If you look at this one. Minus the transaction, minus the transaction. Normally they're in pairs. See, 372 minus 372, but 372, extra, extra. So if you do a transaction for $50 and you say we delete it, and you've seen it when you run your own reports, it shows as minus $50. Okay, so we can't hide anything, and we don't advocate you hide anything. We are not in the business of hiding anything. Okay, so I needed to make that first point to you, that the IRS can see your deleted transactions. No point coming to me and saying, well, okay, so the man didn't have the paper, so he asked us to delete it. Well, that's your problem, not mine. Okay, now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I look at the data. Okay, now, when I want to look at the data, the first thing I do, and when I say looking at the data, I'm looking at it, before the IRS lay hands on it. Remember, this is what the IRS get, but I am looking at it to make sure that your data is safe. Now, there's some things that I think I'm not going to need. So I'm going to first of all delete all the transactions that say deleted. I'm going to assume that these are real deletions that you didn't lie about and that we can justify. So I'm just going to do that. I've highlighted all the deleted transactions. In fact, you can see that they're all highlighted here. I'm just going to right click on the mouse, and then you see it says delete. Okay, I've deleted all the deleted transactions. Okay. Now, after that, I'm going to say, what do I really need to look at? And this is just for me. The IRS do it more comprehensively. Okay, the status. If I'm looking to see whether you're doing dodgy things, I don't really care whether the money has been collected or not. If it's not collected, it will be collected at a certain stage. So I'll highlight this and delete that. Then I'll probably say, well, I don't think this Great British profit and all that is something that the IRS will be interested in. So I'm going to delete that. Okay. The IRS take the view that everything goes through Ghana Commercial Bank. So see Ghana Commercial Bank there. I delete that. Look at this, the agent's name. Yeah, for me, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to delete it. Transaction type. cash collection, I'm going to delete it. Now, please don't think I'm suggesting that the IRS delete this. I don't know what they do, but this is what I do before I look at the data. Okay. Now, so I ask myself, well, I want to see what date and time the transactions were made. I've got the beneficiaries here. I've got the telephone numbers set that. I want to see how many people are using similar telephone numbers. In fact, I have one agent who has about a quarter of his remitters using the same telephone number, and I've been asked that by the New York State Banking Department. And I still get agents who say, oh, he used our address, he used our telephone number. You're looking for trouble. Okay, here's the remitter name. Now, the deduction, there's no deduction, so I'm just going to delete this. Remember, I'm just deleting these things to make it easy for me to have a look through the transactions. That's all I'm doing. So, let me go here a little bit. Commission. In order to analyze the data, I don't need a commission. Now, remitter paid the full amount. I'm not really going to bother with that. Okay. The rate, I'm not going to bother with that. Okay. Destination amount, how much the person paid in cedis. I don't really need that. The source amount, obviously, I want to see who did 3,000, who did 10,000. It went to Ghana. Well, everything goes to Ghana, so I'm not going to do that. Sequence number, well, I suppose we could use the sequence number. But see, this makes the data more manageable. Now, if you look at my data, all I've got is I've got the transaction reference, I've got the source amount, I've got the remitter amount, I've got the telephone number, I've got who the beneficiary was, and I've got the creation date and time. Okay, so let us see what we can do with this data as it stands now. And this is not just going to be me doing it. All of us are going to do this. We're going to have a look at this data. And I think the question we're going to ask ourselves is, how easy is it to analyze patterns in this data? Okay, so first thing I want to do, obviously, if you look at source amount, it shows USD. Numbers are much easier to analyze if it doesn't have the label USD in front. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight all the data, and then I'm going to do something like home and then find. So I'm going to say find all the USDs and then replace with blank, so that this column can actually just show us numbers. So replace all, and see, all that is gone. And then now we've got these things as numbers. Okay. Now, let me just save this document because this is somebody's real document and we've done all these changes. And what I want to do is to save this document and then we can all have a look. So we will call this document, say, I'm just thinking of something silly, but let's say, let's call it Onipa Onipa. So file, I'm going to call it save as. So save as, and then it's called non-structured, but I'm going to call it onipa.com. Then obviously I want to tell the computer this is an Excel spreadsheet, and so we'll save it now. Okay, so save. Okay, so nothing strange going on here. We just have a document that you've helped me create. We've cut out a whole lot of silly things that we thought we didn't need, and now we're going to do our analysis of this document, onipa.com. I'm being honest with you, this is actually one of our agents' data. And after the end of the training, I'm going to ask the agent if it's okay for me to mention their name because the data is very good. I mean, then that's fine. Let me show you what we're going to do. And then I'll show you the kind of questions that the IRS are likely to ask. And then you're going to ask yourself, are these people being reasonable or are they just out to get us? This is, remember, this is 6 months worth of data. Okay. But more importantly, you may want to have a look at your time because that's what I'm going to do. If I double click this here, oh, sorry. Now, the time, I think, oh, it's okay. So the time I'm doing this is actually 10 p.m. Okay. Or 10:02 p.m. Okay. So let's see how long it takes for a typical IRS person to ask, analyze, and find out what's going on with your data. Let's highlight this. Okay. The first thing we do is we say insert, and then we'll use something called pivot tables. So pivot tables. Okay. And you wouldn't worry about this, but we get a blank document like so. So the IRS, they're thinking to themselves, who are the people sending money at your location? Who are these people? So the first thing they ask is, who are your remitters? And then they see remitter here. Now, I hope you're all looking. Remitter. I'm going to drag remitter. You can see that there. That's me dragging remitter all the way here. And lo and behold, all your remitters are showing on the left now. Okay. Now, the IRS might be curious and say, now these remitters of yours, wonder how many times they've all come to send money at your location in the 6 months. How many times? So the first thing to do is, you see it says source amount here. We'll drag source amount. Now I want to take my time so you can see it. So that's source amount. And the moment I've got remitter here, and then I've got count of source amount. So really, if you look here now, what this is telling us is that Abigail Osei Boateng came to your store 10 times in the 6 month period. Adonyan Tichi came to your store 7 times. Adnan Aliu came to your store once. Edu Apinting came to your store once. Efia Se or Sa or Afei Sa came to your store 8 times. Agnes Edujemfi was in your store 14 times. Okay. Now, looks very simple. So, yeah, they were there 14 times. Who cares? Look at here where it says count of source amount. If I double click it, this box opens. Here we were looking at count. Immediately on top of it is sum. And if I click sum, now we've got the monies that Abigail Osei Boateng sent, the money that Adonantichi sent. Now, this is a mix. In a 6 month period, if you look, Adwa Pobi sent 93. And yet still, Abigail Osei Boateng sent 3,395. Now, I don't think the IRS are likely to be interested in Adwa Pobi. What I would suspect is that it would make sense for the IRS to want to sort out to see who are your highest remitters. So if, say, a typical IRS person was to highlight this, drag this all the way to the end. Okay, so we've got everybody up to Yasafu. And we think to ourselves, wonder what these people have been up to. Now, if you look, you see this button here says sort. If I click on sort, if you look here, it says descending from Z to A on remitter. But if I click this now, the sum of the source amount, click that. Okay. Immediately, I can tell at your site, immediately I can tell your highest remitter is Kwejo Bobby. The next one is Sarah Okine. The next one is Frimpong Edujemfi. The next one is Isaac Nana Ewa. See, now if you look, your highest remitter is Kwejo Bobby. The next highest remitter is Sarah Okine. Frimpong Edujemfi. Isaac Nana Ewa. Up to 10,000. Now let's just say that the IRS say, okay, we just want to ask about the first 5. Now, a typical question would be Kwejo Bobby. So what does Kwejo Bobby do for a living? How come Kwejo Bobby is able to send $12,498 in 6 months? That is not an unreasonable question. Let's look here. How come Sarah Okine? Do you have any information on Sarah Okine? What does she do for a living? Now, usually, if you're lucky, Sarah Okine may have sent 3,000 before, so you'd probably have a social security number. If you're lucky and she sent 6,000, well, then you probably have her pay stubs. But what if Sarah Okine was somebody who has only sent 200, 300, 200, 400, 300, 200? That's a problem. And when we have that situation, I always do my best to alert you that please, you're going to need to call these people in and ask them for their financial details. Now, let's just look at the time. It's 10:09. Well, so let's say it's taken us 10 minutes to do this. But let's get fancy. Assuming the IRS want to ask themselves, well, Kwejo Bobby, Sarah Okine, who do they normally send money to? If you look down here, we've got remitter and we've got source amount. Now, if we just pick up beneficiary and stick beneficiary under remitter, hope you're watching. Immediately it tells us Kwejo Bobby sends money to Benudro, sends money to Benis Edusei, sends money to Christiana Kwamu, sends money to Daniel Edusei, sends money to Eric Edu Ejapon, sends money to Gideon Edusei, sends money to Michael Lawa, sends money to Yao Kari Kari. Sarah Okine sends money to Agel Kwachi, Deborah Kobina, Eva Okine, Isaac Ejapon. Actually, not only sends money, but actually here are the monies that they have sent to these people. And you can tell, Kwejo Bobby overall sends the 12,498. If you total these figures, believe it, it will add up to that figure. If you look, Sarah Okine has got 11,250. If you total these figures, it will add up to that. Frimpong Edujemfi, if you total these figures, it will add up to that. So the question, who does Kwejo Bobby send money to? Sorry, the question is, what does Kwejo Bobby do for a living? It's a legitimate one. Now, if you actually look at these transactions, if you look at what Kojo Bobby has been sending, it's tricky because you see here, the highest he's ever sent is 5680. So we may probably never have asked him for pay stubs. But unfortunately, at this stage, when we know the IRS are coming, we've got to call Kojo Bobby and say to him, my friend, you've aggregated 12,498. And so we are going to need you to provide some pay stubs. Now, this is very different from people who are sending 6,000 in one go. Okay. Now, here, Sarah Okan has got 5,000 here. So maybe you will have, or even 5,100 to Eva Okan. So maybe you may be lucky and have their social security number because the threshold for that is 3,000. But you may also be you're going to have to call her and ask her for pay stubs at this stage. Okay. Now, if we look at Frimpong Edujemfi, who's got 11,000, we're actually luckier because when he sent money to Yarafrani here, it was 7,850. And there we would have probably asked for pay stubs, etc. Okay. Now, what I need you to understand is that when the IRS come to you, unlike me, they are not going to show you the spreadsheet. They've checked that at home, so they have an understanding of what they are doing before they come to you. Okay. So, don't give silly answers because these are very serious matters. Okay. If we look here, and in fact, the spread, you could easily have, I have one particular person where the spread is, there's no even 3,000. So that's a nightmare because we don't have any information and yet still the aggregate is quite high. So, okay. Now, just something I wanted to show you so you are under no illusion as to how much the IRS can see. Okay. Now, if the IRS, for instance, wanted to see the dates that Kojo Bobby sent these monies, they can quickly pick up date, creation date from here, which you can see, drag it, drop it down here, and all the dates. You see, Kojo Bobby sent to Ben Odro on these dates, and the amounts are here. Kojo Bobby sent to Benis Adusei on this date, and the amounts are here. Kojo Bobby sent to Christian Kweku Kwesi. Amazing name. Kwewu, oh, sorry, Kwewu Kwesi. Yeah, okay. And these are the dates. Okay. Now, if the IRS wanted to get even fancier, they can actually pick this, see transaction reference, and stick it down here. And then now, Kojo Bobby sent to Ben Odro on this date, and here is the transaction number. Kojo Bobby sent to Ben Adusei on this date, and here is the transaction number. Kojo Bobby sent to Christian Kwewu Kwesi on this date, and here's the transaction number. And if we look, so far, it's only taken 15 minutes to do this analysis. Okay, so I'm going to stop the training here, and then we'll have a discussion, and I'll answer all your questions. The first thing we need to understand, they can see the deleted transactions. Oh, incidentally, the telephone numbers are also right here. I didn't stick the telephone numbers in, but I could easily drop the telephone numbers at the bottom. I'm not even going to bother. If you look here, you see that's the only one I didn't use. Okay, so all I'm going to say to you at this stage is No point. I have a couple of agents who think they're very clever and are always trying to hide things. It's not in your interest. Please, please, please don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. Now, um, we're going to take a break here from this video, and then I'm going to answer all your questions. Then when we come back, I'm going to show you the one that is even more dangerous, structuring, and how you can tell who is structuring on the screen. Very easy. Takes less than 10 minutes. Not in your interest to do it. Thank you very kindly.